This week, we're once again taking a trip through time to trace the century-long saga of violence, corruption, and the brutal struggle for power atop New York's criminal underworld. Right now, Fox 5's Crime in the City, The Mob, Part 2. Here are some of the crimes that gripped the 5 boroughs. We begin in March of 1978, at the scene of a brazen gangland execution on the streets of Little Italy.
He was a Teamsters union official, and police suspected he knew a lot about the disappearance of Jimmy Hoffa. Last night he was walking in Little Italy when 2 gunmen started shooting and left him dying. Gabe has more on that story.
The tenements are closely packed on Mulberry Street near Grand. There are many windows, but police found it difficult today to find many witnesses. Salvatore Briguglio was the business agent of Teamster Local 560, a union in which Anthony Tony Provenzano had a major role. Provenzano had been feuding with Hoffa before the Teamster leader disappeared. Briguglio was gunned down outside Benito's restaurant. It was shortly after 11 last night. The scene just 1 block north of Umberto's Clam House, where gangster Joseph Joey Gallo was assassinated just 6 years ago. Briguglio, police said, had not been inside Benito's. Exactly where he was coming from, not determined. 2 men appeared. They started to argue with Briguglio, pushed him into the street, fired 5 shots into him, and fled, possibly on foot, although there was a report the men had taken off in a car on Grand Street. The head of Manhattan homicide had no doubts about the nature of the crime.
Well, it looks to me as if it was a hit, just as we know, as a hit would get down.
And as far as the motivation is concerned, you have no idea now?
We don't have any idea. Our people are out right now speaking to the Federal Strike Force out in Newark and to the other people who possibly might have information on this gentleman.
Was Briguglio shot because he knew too much? Was he shot because he threatened to talk about what he knew? Many windows on Mulberry Street, few leads. Briguglio, his brother Gabriel, and a third man, Thomas Andretta, were questioned intensively by police in the investigation of the kidnapping and apparent murder of Hoffa. We approached some people on Mulberry Street. Did anyone see what happened? Did they see it from windows?
Not that I know of, no. The detectives investigated us already. They went over our buildings here.
Yeah.
They did investigate us.
And nobody saw anything? Another gangland-style killing on the Lower East Side. The batting average for solution of such crimes is very poor, and privately, police are quite pessimistic that they'll be able to solve this murder or the related crime, the disappearance of Jimmy Hoffa. This is Gabe Pressman, Channel 5 News on Mulberry Street.
Fast forward to February 1987, and another attempted hit with connections to a landmark legal case against the mob.
Good evening. Gunfire sent people running for cover on a busy Greenwich Village street. Those bullets were a message from the mob, the second biggest attempted mob rub-out since they got the Godfather, Paul Castellano. It also involves one of the biggest mafia drug trials in history, the Pizza Connection. The trial is just winding down, but members of the mob have been busy handing out their own sort of verdict. They already killed one defendant. Tonight sent a second man to the hospital. He is fighting for his life right now. Bob O'Brien is at the scene of the shooting. Bob.
John Pietro Alfano and his wife Maria had just been shopping in Balducci's, the trendy Italian specialty shop at 6th Avenue and 9th Street in Greenwich Village. Around 5 o'clock this evening, the couple, laden with Balducci shopping bags, started strolling south on 6th Avenue on their way to meet some friends in a coffee shop on Bleecker Street. When they got to this spot right here, they'd only gone about a half block when 2 would-be killers came up behind them and opened fire. Alfano fell to the sidewalk gravely wounded. A 31-year-old man, Ronald Price, apparently an innocent bystander, was shot in the buttocks by the gunman. Chief of Detectives Robert Colangelo described how the hit happened.
2 suspects exit a red Chevy that's at West 9th and 6th Avenue. They walk south behind Mr. Alfano and his wife, who are also walking south. They fire 3 shots into his back. They turned around then and fired 1 shot at Mr. Price, who was a little further north of Mr. Alfano. After the shooting, one of the suspects fled east on West 9th Street, and he entered a blue van on 5th Avenue, or around 5th Avenue, and then the van fled south on 5th. The other suspect entered a yellow cab that was apparently waiting for them, and they fled north on 6th Avenue.
Francesca Milanato, who speaks Italian, was less than a block away when the shots were fired. She was there as Alfano's wife tried to help her wounded husband.
Basically, the wife trying to find out where was he hit, and just talking to him like, oh, I told you we shouldn't have been here. We shouldn't have come here. And
all of this in Italian.
Yes, and
you understand Italian.
Yes, and she was concerned about calling the police and having the ambulance right away.
Detectives flooded the shooting scene, whisking eyewitnesses away from reporters as it became clear that this was not just an ordinary street shooting, but the second hit on defendants in the so-called Pizza Connection case. December 2nd, someone murdered Gaetano Mazzara, another accused heroin dealer in the alleged billion-dollar mafia drug ring said to have distributed tons of cocaine and heroin in this country. Mazzara's body was found in the Greenpoint section of Brooklyn, stuffed in a plastic bag. He had been shot and bludgeoned. The man shot tonight, Pietro Alfano, is the nephew of Gaetano Badalamenti, former boss of bosses of the Sicilian Mafia, and a chief defendant in the Pizza Connection trial, which is now in summations after more than 16 months of testimony. Right now, Alfano is in surgery in St. Vincent's Hospital a few blocks away from here. He is said to be in critical condition. Bystander Ronald Price, that is also in surgery. He is in guarded condition. Police say they have no idea who is responsible for tonight's hit. It should be pointed out there are still no arrests either in the hit in December on Gaetano Mazzara, and there is also no arrest in the December 1985 street hit on Paul Castellano, then federal defendant and former mob boss. Reporting live from Greenwich Village, Bob O'Brien, Channel 5 News.
Now, what effect does this have on the pizza trial, the Pizza Connection trial? We don't know yet, but you can bet a lot of lawyers are going to be meeting very late tonight, figuring out what's next. Remember a year ago in December, Paul Castellano gunned down in front of Sparks Steakhouse here in Manhattan? It was while he was on trial in a federal courtroom in the city. He was on his way from the trial to dinner. It was an obvious message. Some people wanted a new godfather. And in April of last year, Frank DeSico was blown up by a car bomb outside a restaurant in the Bensonhurst section of Brooklyn. He was called the #2 man in the Gambino crime family.
The following month, Manhattan prosecutors deal a critical blow to a notorious Hell's Kitchen gang.
Prosecutors say it's another big blow to organized crime. 6 members of the Irish gang known as the Westies were charged today with murder and conspiracy. The indictments are expected to cripple the gang that specializes in contract killings. Dave Browdy reports.
She might not look like it, but authorities charged this woman, Francine Mostyn of North Bergen, with being one of the last remaining members of a gang of killers, a gang called the Westies. Mostyn refused comment on conspiracy and drug charges against her as she surrendered today for arraignment in a Manhattan court. She and reputed boyfriend James McElroy were charged with agreeing to arrange a hit for $25,000, a hit on a man who turned out to be the fictitious creation of an undercover cop. But that's not entrapment, said the Manhattan DA.
Since people here involved had a record of murder and volunteered that they were ready, willing, and able to commit the murder, then it's perfectly proper to say we have a target. It's not like going out and saying, say, would you like to murder somebody?
Mostyn and McElroy pleaded not guilty, but McElroy is already facing several other murder counts. His lawyer later told reporters this charge is the least of his worries. 2 other alleged mobsters, William Boken and Kevin Kelly, are also being sought for an April 1985 revenge killing in broad daylight on 35th Street, a murder for which the leader of the Westies, Mickey Featherstone, had already been convicted.
We have tape recorders, conversations in which, at least in part, some of these participants have in fact admitted that Mickey Featherstone was framed and that, in fact, they are the perpetrators of this crime.
The Westies, at their peak, were a force to be reckoned with on Manhattan's West Side. Their roots were in Hell's Kitchen, the 40s around 10th Avenue. Prosecutors say they did a lot of work for the Gambino mafia family, arranged through Big Paul Castellano. And after he was rubbed out in a celebrated gangland hit, prosecutors say the Westies took the contract for the retaliation, and that the Westies set the car bomb that ended the life of mobster Frank DeCicco. DeCicco was said to have helped plan the killing of ex-Gambino family boss Castellano. Prosecutors won't go so far as to say that today's indictments mark the end of the Westies as a force in Hell's Kitchen. But they say now the entire top leadership of the gang is either under indictment, under investigation, or a fugitive. And that, combined with the declining Irish population here, means that the Westies, too, must be on the decline. I'm Dave Browdy, Channel 5 News on the West Side.
Now to the early 90s and the bloody battle for control in the city's most powerful families.
You know, nobody advertises for a new mob boss, but the mob experts say the signs of a shakeup in leadership are pretty obvious, especially at the morgue. Pablo Guzman reports.
August 30th, 1990, Bruno Facciolo, found killed and stuffed in the trunk of a car in Brooklyn. February 5th, Lawrence Taylor, not the football player, shot several times outside his Canarsie home as he was getting out of his car. Last Tuesday, March 26th, Alfred Visconti, shot several times in the lobby of his Flatlands apartment house in Brooklyn. Some law enforcement officials believe these 3 hits were committed at the alleged request of this man, Alfonso Little Al Diarco.
Where the leadership has dissipated or is not able to function, you have associates of the family that have fallouts. And they have the opportunity now to eliminate each other because there's not a strong leadership there to arbitrate what the problem is.
The leadership vacuum the 58-year-old Diarco is reportedly taking advantage of is the Lucchese organized crime family. Little Al Diarco, whose base is reportedly in the heroin business, has been allegedly supervising the Lucchese's for its godfather, Vic Amuso, and its underboss, Anthony Gaspipe Casso, who have been on the lam, fugitives from a federal indictment on conspiring to fix the cost of replacing windows in city housing projects that also included Vinny the Chin Gigante, the reputed head of the Genovese crime family, the second largest mafia operation in New York. Overseeing Genovese operations while Gigante's been tied up with legal and medical problems, some authorities say, is Quiet Dom Cirillo, so low-key he hasn't been busted since 1952. Jerry Capisi in the Daily News first broke the story that Cirillo and Diarco were filling in for 2 godfathers, but law enforcement disagrees over how much power the surrogates are taking for themselves.
I think that's premature to say that these people are running the family. But of course, the mob is structured so that people can replace people so that they can keep a continuity of their illegal activities going.
The consensus seems to be that while Quiet Dom is acting as a caretaker for the Genovese boss, Little Al may give Amuso and Gaspipe a hard time over who's in charge. You cover the mob long enough and eventually there's always new names to learn, new players with roles to figure out. But the basic enterprise remains the same, organized crime, and that's because the money remains very good. I'm Pablo Guzman, Fox News, Channel 5.
Moving ahead to 1993, we get a look at the mob's shadowy influence in a billion-dollar business.
Garbage is big business in New York, and there are a lot of private carting companies around looking for a piece of the action, but the word is the mob controls the private garbage companies. But some of those companies will tell you that's garbage. Bob O'Brien takes a look.
They roam the night streets of the city like urban behemoths, feeding on the leavings of mankind. And it is a rich feast they share. Removing the trash of New York City is a billion-dollar-a-year business. Some say gangsters take the biggest bite of any in the carting industry.
The mob is able to control the industry, not by competing in a better fashion, not by providing better services, but by literally keeping out outside competition and forcing their will through fear of damage to property, to the individual, labor problems, destroying the business.
That is not the story you hear from people who work for V. Ponte & Sons, the New York area's #1 hauler. Vincent Ponte started as a paper scavenger 75 years ago. Ponte & Sons now has a fleet of more than 100 vehicles picking up waste paper and trash. Phil Baker's been driving for Ponte for a decade.
It seems to be a common misconception that there's mob influence within this industry. All I do know is that I work for a hard-working family who's worked 16 hours a day with me for the last 10 years.
Until 3 years ago, Ponte's CEO, Robert Silvestri, was a partner in a huge New York commercial real estate firm. He used to be one of Ponte's best customers.
It's always been competitive bidding when I was in real estate. And on this side of the fence, we've lost bids in competitive bidding process, and we've gained business through competitive bidding. But we've always dealt in a competitive bid situation in both areas.
Not buying and selling customers from the mob.
Not buying and selling from the mob, no.
Despite the denials by those in the waste hauling industry that there is mob influence or control over the carting business, there have been murders of area waste haulers who have cooperated with law enforcement, murders that lawmen insist were committed by mobsters trying to control the hauling cartels. Waste hauler Robert Kubeka and his brother-in-law Donald Barstow were assassinated in their Long Island office in August of 1989. They were about to testify against more than 100 area carters in a federal racketeering case. The reputed mafia boss of Long Island haulers, Salvatore Avellino, goes to trial in February for allegedly ordering the hit. Lawmen say James Jimmy Brown Failla is the mafia king of Manhattan's trash cartel. Failla goes on trial in April for allegedly arranging the demise of a mobster about to rat on the garbage game. The city's newest garbage hauler uses escorts by armed guards as its workers pick up the trash. Trucks subcontracted by Browning Ferris Industries are followed through the night by security details. BFI is the second largest solid waste company in the world. The multinational garbage giant plans to take a big bite of the Big Apple's billion-dollar carting business.
We don't think there's going to be any trouble. We haven't had any trouble, and we're simply taking a precautionary measure to make sure that there isn't any trouble.
But you're taking precaution with guns, and that seems to connote some level of threat.
Security forces, private security forces in the city normally carry firearms. Ours do sometimes, ours don't sometimes.
BFI plans to bring a level of competition to the New York garbage market that's never existed before. BFI bosses say that's bound to ruffle some feathers. Bob O'Brien, Fox News.
And finally, we revisit the early months of 2005 for a shocking story of betrayal within the ranks of the NYPD.
Two retired NYPD detectives are accused of being hired guns, murdering people for the mafia while they were on the force. Fox 5's Andrea Day has more right now. Andrea?
And Chris, investigators say this was going on for years before they were finally stopped in their tracks last night in Las Vegas.
In a stunning betrayal of their shields, their colleagues, and the citizens they were sworn to protect, Louis Eppolito and Stephen Caracappa secretly worked on the payroll of the mob while they were members of the NYPD.
They were partners, detectives. Stephen Caracappa helped start the NYPD's organized crime homicide unit, and Eppolito, the son of a mobster, claimed in his autobiography he joined the force to become an honest cop. But investigators say they played a direct role in at least 11 murders, even kidnapped one man and delivered him to his killers. And it didn't stop there. The indictment alleges the two retired detectives used confidential NYPD files as their personal yellow pages and then passed along key information to the Lucchese crime family.
They ultimately passed the information to Anthony Gaspipe Queso, the Lucchese underboss, who used the information to kill his rivals, to kill potential witnesses against him and his associates, and to kill disloyal members of his crime family.
And investigators say they were paid very well, at least $4,000 a month.
And that's this week's Crime in the City. Subscribe for more at youtube.com/Fox5NY.